Abram Jackson, welcome into the podcast studio, mate. It's really good to have you on board. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Daniel. Awesome to be here.
Now, for those watching and listening, tell us a little bit about your story, where you've come from and what you're doing now, and I guess what's keeping you busy.
Sure. So I started at Microsoft right out of college. I joined the Exchange Online team, and my job was back-end systems, database replication. And as Exchange Online grew, a lot around high availability and site resilience and uptime and storage systems.
Yep.
Several years later, I started our internal AI platform that is used for building AI features in M365. This was around 2016. So these are features like Smart Reply, Reply Assistant, these other kinds of AI features from the previous generation of AI. April of 24, I moved over to Copilot, Microsoft 365 Copilot, in this brand new area of extensibility. The team had just done a couple of demos that were pretty much mocked up and animated, and we had to make it real. So I took over that charter of Copilot extensibility, where initially we were doing the plugin style, and then it was just this January where we started talking about agents. So I got to define and run the agents project for the team. I took the summer off for my wife to have a child, and I came back, and I still get to do this really cool stuff. So now my job is kind of a PM architect, thinking about the future of what we're doing in Copilot agents, what we need to add, and the ways that it's going to evolve.
Interesting space, and I would assume that it's a pretty exciting space, and obviously changing at a rapid rate of knots as well. Now, I guess the last couple of years, sort of 2023 and throughout this 2024, we've kind of been through or involved. This is outside of Copilot as well, but we've in the AI space. It's around the generative AI, so it's more around the chat-based, conversational type of interactions. Now we're moving quite quickly into I guess what you're looking at the moment and looking after and managing is around agents. So how do you see, or have you seen that transformation from that sort of chat-based scenario with Gen AI now moving towards agents and what you think, the next 12, 24 months is looking like in that space?
I love tinkering and watching what the open source community is doing, what other companies are doing in this space. Because I was doing internal AI platform, I was pretty involved in using the original, the GPT-3 and even predecessors like BERT and some of these other transformers and language models. But ChatGPT surprised me, like it surprised basically everybody, how useful it was to have instruction following. That was the key insight between GPT-3 and ChatGPT, is the fine-tuning to have it follow instructions. And of course, in that case, follow instructions of have a chat conversation instead of just continue to add words. That was a real breakthrough because no longer did you need to be a data scientist to take a model and fine-tune it and train it and spend millions of dollars on your specific scenario like we were doing with many of the AI features in Microsoft 365. And instead, you could just write out in language what task you want to complete. That's what really blew everybody away. And it's as these models have improved and grown and gotten larger, it's really astounding how much they can do. Where now it'd be really easy to build some of those features that we used to spend millions of dollars of training on. Now we can just build them with a sentence or two, and we've gotten it started. So this is really awesome as a user, where you can be that data scientist. You can apply that AI yourself for whatever your scenarios are. So Microsoft 365 Copilot is designed specifically on that scenario to be your chat, but that means that you can instruct it. You can ask Copilot to do your new AI task. Instead of waiting for a big company to create an AI feature that is close to what you need, you can have Copilot build it right now in a few seconds. That's what's really incredible. And there's so much that just chat is able to do. There's going to be years of adoption and saturation of this new capability of chatting with AI. I think that's going to take years to play out in the enterprise and in the world. I think where that's going, there's going to be a lot to do. Now, agents, the product that I've been working on, Copilot agents, make this a lot easier. And what it currently is, it's taking those same pieces of giving instructions or asking for a task from Copilot, but packaging them up along with the grounding information and function calling to create that AI task. Makes it much more powerful and more easily shareable. And so this allows for makers, software developers to package up these best practices and integrate with these other software systems. So today's agents are fantastic, and I think the best way of combining these instructions and grounding information and basically adding that new capability of chat and giving instructions and creating new AI out of any system and any content. So that's really fantastic and astounding, and I think it's going to take years to really saturate and for us to find where the value is.
Interesting. Now, you've written quite a bit about around AI in general, about the hardest problem is around teaching users how to use it better. Do you think that helps or influences what you're doing at a product level around sort of these agents as well?
It absolutely is. I just talked about how chat is so incredible at now you can create your own AI to do any task. But the text, chat, and even voice conversation interface, it leaves a lot to be desired. It, in particular, really lacks, buttons and graphs and pictures and things to show. And so you've got to keep all of this in your mind, what you are doing. So that's kind of a real challenge here. And we have a lot less in a chat box of guiding the user into what they can do. Right? As I'm looking at this recording interface, right, there's a button for all of the things that I can do and that are useful because the software developer thought about what scenarios I need to help the users do. This AI space is different because the user is figuring out what they want to do. And so we can't make a button for them for that thing that they haven't even thought of yet. But that's a real challenge for them because now they need to transition from this way that we've been interacting with computers for a very long time. And even before the graphical interface, the command line similarly had instructions and specific things that you could type in. Now the user philosophically, they're programming. In practice, they don't have to realize that they're programming, but it's a different mind space than using an application. They're really creating an application. That application is just, AI completing a task in most cases. We also have Copilot pages and some of those capabilities. But this is a whole new way of thinking and interacting with computers. And that's hard. If we were instead just putting buttons on the screen, that would be so much easier for users to use because that is the modality that they were most used to. On the other hand, right, with those buttons, you can't do a new thing. You are limited to what the software developer has decided that you should be able to do. So this is a real thought transformation that we need to guide our users through. And of course, we're trying all kinds of different things to help our users understand the vastness of this space by adding some buttons to give them some ideas, by helping them with some autocomplete or expanding. So there's a lot that we can do right in the interface to sort of help them with that chat, but they still need to change their mindset around how they're interacting with AI.
Now, I think for me anyway, and the organisations I'm speaking to, I think that they're starting to realise now where the real power, or the real power of Copilot is obviously in the data, and the accessibility of the data, the cleanliness of it, the relevance of it, and all that sort of stuff. Whether that is in SharePoint or it's also now grounded in line of business data and things like that we can now interact with. What kind of trends and what are you seeing out there at the moment, and how organisations are leveraging a little bit more of the extensibility side of Copilot and plugging in and getting into other, outside of the M365 boundaries into their other line of business data through the extensibility models?
Well, it is so powerful for a worker, an employee, to have all of their data accessible through AI, such that they don't have to change between one AI system to another, if that other system even has AI in it, which, of course, many line of business applications don't and never will. When we can combine those information systems, whether they're line of business or purchased software, with their SharePoint content or their email, their Teams chats, their meetings, and the rest of the things that they have in Microsoft 365, it really enables them to do their entire scenario. I usually think about this as whenever you're using some application, some purchased software or some line of business software, you do something, you create something, but then usually you need to communicate with somebody about it. Hey, boss, I'm done. Here's the result, right? Or it's a presentation or an email or a meeting or something like this. And so often the results of using that software application also are necessary in Microsoft 365, in Outlook and Teams and SharePoint, as Word documents, and all of these other interfaces. So what we're doing with Microsoft 365 Copilot is allowing you to take those external systems, apply best-in-class AI to them immediately, and also integrate them directly into those Microsoft 365 applications so that you can use it for communications. So you can use your SharePoint documents, PDFs, your sales data, your service tickets, and create one resulting document from all of it, with AI assisting you the whole way through. That's really powerful. And I think that's how we get Copilot to be as an employee's Copilot, where it's not a lot of different AI systems that you're interacting with, but it's really your personal assistant. I often think about this as a literal personal assistant that executives might have. I don't, where they are aware of the things that you're working on, your preferences, your projects and topics, the systems that you're using, and help you with a lot of that work. But you're still in charge, right? They are your assistant, just like a co-pilot in an airplane. Well, the pilot's in charge and they're deciding which way the plane goes, but the co-pilot takes on many of those tasks.
And where do you see? What's your thought on? We've got these two concepts. So there's this concept of human-led orchestration, and then also this more autonomous. Well, more recently, this more autonomous, multi-agentic type of capabilities. So we're now, able to, soon being able to have autonomous agents in Copilot and things like that, being able to actually go out and be on autopilot really, and wait for something to happen, and then actually go and do some tasks and potentially form our own little outsourced AI agent, little internal team as well, where we, chaining a few different activities together, or a few different agents together. How do you see the differences between those and one versus the other?
There's a lot of things that we can mean by being agentic, and autonomy is part of that. Yep. But I split that out into a lot of subcategories. So one subcategory is being proactive, One subcategory is long running, right? We can imagine giving a task
Mm-hmm.
that takes a few days to complete. Others are more difficult tasks. We often just kind of assign the word agentic to some of the scenarios that require generative reasoning. And then we also have communication outside of you as a user, right? Being able to send communications on your behalf. And then finally, we have interacting with an operating system, right? Like we've seen some of the demos and projects about seeing what's on the screen and moving the mouse around and clicking on things. When people say agentic, they mean all of those different things, or they mean a subset of them, and nobody uses the same subset. But all of these things together, everybody has a pretty similar idea in mind of what value they hope to get out of an agent, which is that same personal agent scenario where you give a high level task to something or some person, and they do a lot of the thinking for you, and they do a lot of the work for you, and they're working on your behalf specifically. And then they come back to you to help you. There's a lot that we can and will do with Copilot agents to make them more agentic. We named them agents very specifically with this in mind, that we would be adding in these capabilities that help them work better for you at whatever your tasks and projects and software systems are. The most exciting piece here, that's in the industry and is, the talk of Twitter and the social media is the generative reasoning shown by O1 as well as QWQ and DeepSeek. These models are really incredible at how advanced they can be when the task is well enough defined and all of the context is there. This is a really exciting area. Copilot Consumer, available in Windows, already supports O1 generative reasoning, and I use it frequently to understand huge sections of code, to write brand new projects from scratch just from a few sentences of description. It's really incredible what O1 can do, especially in math and programming. Of course, our work is, as information workers, is less well defined than math problems, the formal logic that can go into math. So this is a challenging area. Like, how do you, like a new paragraph of your strategy document, how do you show that it's verifiably correct? This is unknown. We don't know how to make sure a paragraph is verifiably correct. So this is a real challenge at applying these O1, the generative reasoning models, to our information work. Of course, there's a lot of people looking at a lot of different aspects of it, either in subdomains where we can verifiably determine correctness, or in just applying them in a looser way. So you asked about human-led orchestration, and that's kind of the model that we have now. Until this generative reasoning can produce verifiably correct sub-steps, you as a user or you as a human can step in and help with these sub-steps. So you can ask Copilot, you can ask even simpler models of this too. You can ask GPT-4 models this same thing, and it will produce a plan for you pretty well, not in the same way that generative reasoning will. But when it produces a plan for you, you can interact with it, say, hey, like that step's not correct. I actually meant this. You can clarify it when you see it written down. And then you can have it go in step by step. And it might make mistakes, right? This AIs hallucinate. That's one problem. The other side of this problem is it wasn't defined clearly enough, and so it's not what you imagined in your head. But when you are stepping through the AI, step by step with it, then you can correct it. You can get it back on track, and you can accomplish really significant tasks, broad tasks that involve several different steps with the AI helping you in each of them. That model is really powerful. I do think one day generative reasoning will be more successful, less prone to getting off track, less prone to hallucination, better at clarifying your intent up front, and we'll be able to step back from being involved in every single step. Those steps will get larger and larger over time, such And soon we'll be able to give very big, broad tasks to Copilot, just like we would a human, expert assistant. I think that day's coming, and it might not be that long with how quickly all of the AI is progressing.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think the barrier? So the barrier of entry here to like as a normal as an information worker that is not obviously a developer or pro code and things like that. So we've got this low code, pro code type of scenario. So the developing or the creation of these agents. What do you think about the barrier of entry for a normal information worker? Is that going to be, or is that, and can you see that being like from an adoption point of view, a good, because I mean, I see agents as being a really good way of increasing user adoption for people in using Copilot as well. So for example, if we're, just take a fairly, what we would probably consider a fairly simplistic approach in terms of creating a custom agent for a SharePoint site or documents in a document library or a folder or things like that. We can quickly create an agent for that's grounded in specific documents or content. I just think that is a really good, even almost like an entry point, because I get there's a lot of comments and feedback around the responses that Copilot comes back with. So rather than, using BizChat or something like that, where it's got, Copilot's got access to everything that you've got access to basically. And then there's a lot of data there, but being able to ground an agent in even right down to a specific document is going to tend to bring back some more accurate and I'll say more correct type of responses. So do you think that type of, agents are actually, potentially going to increase that user adoption and usability?
I think agents absolutely are a way of getting around this problem of chat being a very difficult interface.
Mm.
And this is because, it effectively, when an agent is created, now it is a button that's on the screen.
Mm.
But it's not a button that Microsoft developed, right? Because we have to support all kinds of work, right? From professional lawyers and paralegals to doctors to operations managers and everything in between and beyond. So we can't create a button that is tailored to what your role is.
Yeah.
But when that button does exist, that is review contract, right? When review contract is a button, and in this case, like the contract is specific to your role in industry, not even a generic contract, now we can have the users get so much more value. These agents mostly aren't doing anything that a user couldn't do by prompting, right?
Yeah.
And using /mention to bring in the files and things like that. But that's a lot of work. And it's certainly a lot of work when you review 12 contracts a day.
Mm.
When you can click on the review contracts button, that really helps you bring in all of that. And now you've got an AI product that's specifically designed and tailored exactly to you. So that is absolutely a way that we get past AI, be it missing all of that context. And these agents, because they're so simple and they are mostly a prompt, like they're mostly the instructions and a file picker, like more or less that is what they are. They can have third-party actions and APIs, but end users are unlikely to be authoring new web APIs. For end users, it's mostly typing in something, and it's human language, it's natural language of including all of the different languages that we support, just describing what their job is. And describing what your job is absolutely something that anybody can do that's communicative. As information workers, like we understand our jobs better than anybody else, and we talk about them and we can describe them in communication. In a conversation is really what this is. And so then it's a file picker, which information workers are, of course, also very capable of using and have been using as we've been using computers for decades. So we used to talk, or we still do, we talk about professional developers, maker developers. I'm starting to talk about user developers, where these are not even makers. right?
Yeah.
Like makers have a role here and they're important about creating automations and assistance for their team and for things that their coworkers are doing. But we also now have user developers. So we already kind of used the word no code, so it's even less than that, right? Negative code, zero. Like maybe we need a new word for what this is, because it's not even representative of code anymore. Like even in the no code solutions, you drag boxes on the screen that represent a bunch of code. It's code somewhere. For the user developer, it's not. It's just conversation. It doesn't represent a bit of code even anymore. This is the lowest barrier to entry I think we've ever had in application development, because now it's a similar level as create Word document, right? Or create Teams channel and invite some members. It's hardly even an application in interface in terms of development, but in practice, like the capabilities of it are some of the most advanced AI to assist you on exactly your job to get huge amounts of new value. So the potential here is really high, and the barrier of entry is the lowest it has ever been in application development.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what about in your role? I mean, you came onto my radar over on LinkedIn about some things that you're doing and some little agents and some stuff that you're doing. I know Jeremy Thake as well is doing some stuff around creating an agent every week and stuff like that. As an end user yourself, are you starting to use, or what does your agent portfolio yourself look like?
Sure. Well, I spend a lot of time using agents to explore even different AI interfaces and conversation styles. So, like one agent I built recently clarifies. So, right now, the way that AI and these language models are fine tuned, they try to answer you, like no matter what, basically.
Yeah.
These language models actually have a really hard time saying, I don't know, right? When they would say, I don't know, they usually hallucinate an answer instead. But the other problem that we have here is if you haven't defined your task clearly enough, it will give you boring generic output. We call this pablum or AI slop in the industry and on the social media. And you see a lot of it, and I can now just smell it out immediately. It starts off like in today's fast-paced software environment, like all of the time,
Yeah.
and it is so bad. So this agent that I created helps me It asks me 3 questions. So I'll write something, and if it responded to that original one and tried to answer it, it would generate some slop. So instead, it spends some time clarifying with me. Did you mean this or that? Right? Would you like me to go into this kind of detail? How would you like the output to be viewed? So this is just a really useful interface paradigm in that particular case. The other part that I'm really excited about is the autonomous agents that are coming in from Copilot Studio, as well as Copilot Actions, which we just announced at Microsoft Ignite. Both of these are starting to add more agentic capabilities to Copilot. Actions in particular, it takes a signal that has happened, right? Or a schedule that has happened, right? When you've received a new email, when a file is uploaded, when I'm mentioned in this Teams channel, and many others besides. This is really where we get proactive value out of these agents and out of Copilot.
Yeah.
So when you find yourself repeating a task for the 10th time, that's a great time to have an AI agent do a lot of it for you. It's still good to have a human in the loop for it to be your assistant to respond to you so that you can then go put whatever the resulting content is into that system. That's still good practice. But when we can have it take care of tasks for us, well, that's going to be another stepwise change in these agents and in Copilot. The other thing that I love doing with agents is helping me write documents. But I don't have it just write a document or a post on LinkedIn. That tends not to be a very good strategy. You end up with pretty boring slop there unless you get very specific. So instead, I use it as a creative partner and a reviewer. So I can make an agent understand my style. I can even give it examples of how I post. And then it can review my articles and suggest, replacing a sentence, adding a transition, changing the hook. Or if I get stuck and I've got writer's block, give me some ways to continue this post. Give me several options. And then I might choose from them, or it might just unstick me so that I can keep writing. There's so many different ways to use these things.
There is. So with these agents, are you creating these in Copilot Studio? And with the way that if we go back to the example of the clarifying agent that you've got, where it's asking you questions, it's kind of like the flip conversation model. So but you've got all of that in the instructions of the agent itself on what to do. Do you think? So when you're creating these agents in Copilot Studio and the instructions part, you're obviously being very, very detailed in the instructions of that particular agent, yeah?
That's right. Yeah, so these agents, I mostly build agents that are mostly instructions. Sometimes I do find it useful to ground in a certain document or a folder, but often it is just instructions. And it is interaction patterns that I've learned can be really helpful with AI. And I'm just formalizing it. I give some examples, like I formalize what it means and what to do, and I give a couple of examples. And I just write it out in the instructions. And then I can click on the Create Agent button there in Copilot Studio, and then I can reuse it very easily.
Yeah.
The other really cool thing to do with these agents, and one of my favorite patterns, is include them in one conversation. So you're just talking to one at a time, but you are doing multiple different steps in sequence. So you mentioned LinkedIn, right? So there's idea generation, there's unblocking, there's reviewing, there's pretend to be a critic and what would they complain about on this post? Like, what are my haters going to comment here on this post? You can bring all of those together into one conversation. And so it's helping you every step of the way from ideation to completion.
And that's where I think the real power is going to be. So you've got all of these. Well, actually, a question. So with these agents, do you think it's best practice, or are you seeing best results with specific agents doing single tasks as opposed to trying to create one agent that does lots of things? And in that example, there's a really good use case there where you're having a single conversation, but you're bringing in different agents to do specific tasks. And that way you can go from complete one, go to the next, go to the next, go to the next. And those agents are really, fine-tuned to a specific singular task.
Yes. There's two reasons to make fairly narrowly scoped agents. One is because the AI has more trouble the broader that you make it.
Yeah.
And again, this is because when you're trying to do something, you need to be very specific about what you're trying to get done, right? Or it'll go do something else, related, or just like the very average version of it, internet public content average. So when you can specify, like give it some detail just in how having the button on the screen helps the user, having this scoping helps the AI. It gives it context of what it needs to complete and why, right? And it relates it to the specific data, the specific functions that it needs to be using.
Yeah.
So that's one reason why it's very helpful to create fairly scoped agents. The other reason is it's often useful to use these agents in different contexts and in different workflows.
Yeah.
So if you tried to create your entire job as one AI agent, you'd end up with 12 different sections of it, but you'd also use these things in different orders. And your boss would give you a new task and you wouldn't be able to use it as well. But if you create it as 12 different agents that are individual things or projects or steps or functions that you do, then you can remix the order of them and apply them to whatever your current task is. That's what's really powerful. And of course, Copilot is there in the background all of the time and can bring in any content that wasn't included in the agent or web searching information, to bring in anything that you haven't included as an agent yet. Of course, also custom prompting so that you can change what they're doing.
Yeah. You mentioned briefly there about actions. Talk to me a little bit about actions and where you see the power in those specifically, and who do you think is going to get the most benefit out of those type of processes?
The capabilities of Copilot actions are very exciting in the direction that they're going. So if you're not familiar with Copilot actions, you set up what they are triggered on, and then you give it a few steps to complete, including steps with a language model. And then you give it how you want to be notified, like where to send the results. I think this is going to be hugely powerful for anybody, frankly. The interesting thing here is that a Copilot action isn't just customer service representative, new ticket in queue. Like they can build that, yes, right? But I can also build that for, a new deck was uploaded into our weekly Shiproom SharePoint site. And I've got my work items in Azure DevOps, and I need to summarize the most important updates to them, and I need to update the presentation. So right now, probably that wouldn't work without any human intervention, but what it can do is get all of that information gathered for me, give me the information, its reasoning, why it chose these instead of those, give it to me in a table. I can look at them, rewrite them if necessary, and copy paste them into PowerPoint. So that's a lot of information workers have very different jobs every single day. If you think about, I'm in this podcast right now. I usually don't have podcast interviews, but there's a lot of things that we can do where the individual steps are repeated. So I think they're going to be super valuable for absolutely anybody that takes the time to set them up.
Yeah, and from I'm going to put you on the spot here. If you could estimate a time saving around with all the agents, how many agents have you got? How many of your little spidey agents have you got out there working for you?
I'd have to count. It's probably like 40 or 50. That's probably what's
okay
right now. Yes.
And of those 40 or 50, how much over the course of, let's just say over the course of a week, how much time do you think your little army of agents are saving you?
Let's see.
Don't get yourself into trouble with your boss, because your boss is now going to think you're sitting there doing nothing, and you've got all your little agents doing everything for you.
The scenario that really saves me the most time, so I'll just pick one, is reviewing documents.
Okay.
So I'll write something, and then I will describe the reviewer, the person that's going to need to review this. Like if it's an executive presentation, like it's my boss, it's their boss, it's their boss, and it's their boss.
Yeah.
And they've all got different thought processes, things that they focus on, things I've learned that they ask about, and the way that they ask questions. So the way that I used to have to do this is I would set up a meeting with my boss, and then she'd give me feedback, and then I would iterate on it, and then I would set up a meeting with their boss, and then they would give me feedback, and I would iterate on it, and I'd do that 4 times, and it would take 4 weeks of calendar time, and a good amount of actually synchronous meeting time as well, a couple hours there. I can create an agent for my boss, the way that they review documents, and I can have them review it in a few seconds. That's a week of calendar time on an hour of synchronous meeting time as well. And my boss thinks I've written a better document. I have written a better document.
Tell me how you go about creating an agent for your boss. How does that even start? If you work for somebody for a while, you get a sense of, like I've been in so many of those meetings where they review a document of mine.
And I can think about what Perry Clark tends to think about in his reviews, and of course, I've got plenty of transcripts as well if I need them. But for the most
Yeah.
part, like I can just think, oh yeah, he's gonna ask about this one. Now I'm at the point. I've worked for Perry for so long, all the way back in Exchange Online, by the way, for 13 years now, where I know the things that he's going to be asking about. He's going to be asking about the cost structure. He's going to ask, where's the profit? What users are going, like, what are the incentives that we're creating? Other things too. Perry's a great boss. And so I can just list some of those questions in the instructions. I give
Yeah.
it usually when I create an agent, I start off with a purpose. Like, your job, you're going to review this document for me, and you're going to pretend to be this person. Maybe I don't use their name, maybe I just use a role. And I'll say, this person, you are really interested in this topic, and this topic, and this topic. List them out. And I can give examples of those questions as well. Then I can, now that we have agents in Word and PowerPoint directly, I don't even have to copy paste around. And I can have, Perry Clark as an agent reviewing my document right
Do
there in Word.
you do you name your agents with your with the names of those people?
I'm a little bit more circumspect than that right now.
Okay. With is there a best practice or a good approach that you've found when you're creating these agents in the instructions to have like a framework or a structure to the instructions? So you just mentioned there that you'd always start with a purpose. Is there a
Mhm.
structure that you tend to follow?
Yes, there is. But and I'll describe it, but I'll also say it's less and less necessary. It
Hmm.
used to be, with the very first versions of the first instructions, you had to be really good at prompt engineering. That's
Yep.
less and less the case. Just about all advice I can give now in prompting, which includes writing instructions for agents, is just good conversation techniques,
Yep.
where you want to be clear about what you're saying, right? You don't want to have any unclear pronouns, right? Or I forget all the grammar words, but like all of these techniques about being clear and having good communication and writing apply. And
Yep.
that's most of what you can do. Now, you can get some additional advantage in a few ways. The big one is examples. Examples are very, very helpful. I also tinker with a lot of other projects, and I'll use small models. Particularly small models really need examples, right?
Yep.
If you want to correct an email address, you need to give it 3 examples of correcting email addresses. Otherwise, it's going to give you a page of text with maybe a corrected email address somewhere in the middle, a big intro and outro. So giving it an example
Mm.
really helps. This applies also to the large models, but not as much. So, but the pattern that I do use that give me a little bit of an edge in creating instructions is using Markdown format. These things work really well with Markdown. However, I have seen research lately that they might do even better with JSON. I haven't tried
Okay.
that yet, but Markdown's really simple to use. I start off with a purpose, right? So the very first thing that the AI is seeing is the overall context of what it's supposed to be doing. Then I'll create a Markdown heading and I'll give it guidance, of things that I see it's doing when I test it that I don't want it to do. And it's better to have positive instructions
Yeah.
than negative examples. Do this is somewhat better than do not do that. However, sometimes there isn't a way to negate that without saying do not. Then another Markdown heading and start giving examples. The really cool thing is you can screw up the formatting and it doesn't care, right? The AI can look past, a missing curly brace or anything else. Is really fun. Just an aside, one side project I had, I was having a real issue with LangChain templates and variables within it in
Yeah.
Python because you need to double curly brace variables in an abstract, whatever. LangChain has a bug, it's listed online, that JSON lines were failing to parse some of the time with those double curly braces around the variable. And I'd spent like an hour trying to fix it and work around this bug. Then, instead of JSON lines, I just replaced the JSON line curly braces with square brackets. which is not valid JSON. You can't use square brackets to represent a JSON object. That's that's an array. But the AI doesn't care. It's like, square brackets are pretty close to curly brackets. We'll just go for it. It totally worked around the problem.
Yeah, very good. Amazing. Yeah, some great insights there. Now, as we wrap things up, what does next year look like for you? I mean, we've spoken a lot about where the last few years being that chat conversational type of thing. Where do you think next year, or businesses and individuals for that matter, are going to get the most benefit out of Copilot?
I think we are going to see continued adoption of these instructions, right, of these agents, both in end users or user developers, creating things for themselves, makers creating things for their teams as they recognize patterns there, and then organizations using AI as the top down to identify super valuable projects that are going to save them huge amounts of time. So I think all three of those trends are going to increase. I think we'll continue to see more and more of all three of those.
Yeah, definitely.
But in this upcoming year, I'm also very excited to see Copilot and agents working more across the rest of the Microsoft 365 clients. There's a lot of things in the waffle. There's a lot of AI Copilot chat boxes around. Very excited about getting agents into more of those places. We just hit general availability of agents in Word and PowerPoint, for example. At Ignite, we were talking about increasing those capabilities, making them work especially well using the context of what's going on the screen. So I think we're going to see Copilot and chat and agents taking more, being available in more of your software. That's one thing that I'm really excited about. And then the other is being proactive with Copilot Actions. I think Copilot Actions is going to be extremely valuable in the direction that it's going. And the capabilities that it's going to start unlocking, certainly within the next 12 months.
Yeah. I've really enjoyed looking and watching what you're producing, the content, the examples, and the real world use cases. I think people get a lot of benefit out of just seeing and listening how people are using Copilot and especially agents. Following what you're doing and the content that you're sharing is really valuable, not just for me, but for a lot of other people. Now, for those that have made it this far and are watching and listening, where can people keep up to date with what you're doing and consume the content and get in contact with you if they need to, or just stay updated with what's coming?
Sure. Well, the best place to learn about Copilot, right, and the features that we have and that are coming, right, is in at learn.microsoft.com. Got a great link, aka.ms/m365 Copilot Dev. That's what I'd suggest. Any very technically minded, we've got makers and professional developers, I think, a lot listening to this. That is the best place, absolutely, to learn what's going on. For some of my own, personal thoughts and ramblings and articles and thoughts about the future, unrelated, well, certainly related to my job, but, unrelated officially, absolutely find me on LinkedIn. I just started a newsletter there. I've also got a website, abramjackson.com. It's the same content in either place, but I'm happy to interact with you, with the listeners here, in any of those places.
Amazing, mate. Thank you very much for coming on to the pod. It was a really good conversation, fascinating insights, and I'll let you go and interact with your 40 or 50 little Copilot agents that you've got waiting there to take on some work. So once again, thanks, mate. Thanks for the chat.
Thank you, Daniel. It's my pleasure.